We are going to be talking about something called compound interest. You guys remember compound interest from last year? So we'll be talking about that as part of our chapter 3. But there's some stuff that involving money that gets a lot more complicated that we're not going to be talking about because the equations for it become pretty monstrous and messy. But it is the real world stuff that you're going to be dealing with. Things like car loans, student loans, home mortgages, and also investment accounts all use this math. And your calculator has a wonderful little app that you may find yourself. In fact, when I was shopping for a house a year and a half ago, I have my TI calculator with me, and I use this finance app to do a whole bunch of like just playing around with numbers and stuff. So again, this will probably be the most important thing that we do all year in terms of your like actual real life outside of work, and it is probably the biggest reason to hang on to these graphing calculators after you get out of college. Although there are similar apps for your phone now that do the exact same thing. But let's just talk about, just to give you an idea of why this is complicated. We're going to look at a situation. So this is a pretty typical situation. When you do start working, you're going to want to start saving for retirement. And if you haven't heard this already, I'll be the first of many people to tell you want to start doing that right away, as early as you possibly can. That's how you end up with lots of money when you're retired. Do not wait. First job, first paycheck, start stocking away for retirement. So Jim here is going to do that. And he's decided he's going to put $200 away every month towards retirement. And he's going to earn interest on top of that. Now, if he was just putting $200 in at the beginning and earning interest on top of that, that would be that compound interest you learned last year. What makes this complicated is that he's not just satisfied with the $200 that he starts with. He's going to add another $200 every month on top of that. That's what complicates the situation. So just to kind of illustrate it, we'll work it through by hand once. Again, you want to have your calculators out. If you don't have them, get them now. So we're starting out with $200 in month 1. And at the end of that month, he's going to earn some interest on that $200. Now, we need to do a little bit of vocab here. You're going to see this a lot. 4.8% per year compounded monthly. Sometimes they'll just say something like 4.8% APR. Have you ever heard that? Like on a car commercial, like 2.9% APR financing available, right? So APR is annual percentage rate. And it's kind of weird. It's a little bit, doesn't quite work the way you think it would. But basically, when you see 4.8% per year, you're not actually earning 4.8% per year. You're earning a monthly interest rate that would be whatever this is divided by 12. Okay, so your actual interest rate is 4.8 divided by 12, which is, this is why we want our calculators out. Although we can probably do that. That's 0.4, I believe. Someone confirm that for me. 0.4%. And as a decimal, 0.4% would be what? One percent is 0.01, right? So 0.4% would be 0.004 as a decimal. 100 is 1 as a decimal. 100% is 1 as a decimal. 0.4% would be 0.004. Basically, we need to divide by 100. Divide this by 100, you're going to get 0.004. We're going to be doing a lot of this, so if that seems weird to you right now, don't worry about it. That 4% is what we're going to use to figure out our interest, right? So we've got $200 in the bank right now. If I take my interest on this, is going to be 200 times that 0.004. So how much interest is young Jim going to earn on this first $200? A whopping 80 cents. Right? 0.8 would be 80 cents, which doesn't seem like much, but interest adds up over time. So at the end, when we start month 2, we're going to have our original $200 plus this 80 cents. And then Jim, being the smart investor that he is also going to plunk down an additional $200 because because every month he's adding another $200. So I've got the original $200 that I already had, plus my interest on that $200, and then he's adding another $200. And so whopping total here is going to be what, $400.80. You guys following me so far? $400.80. Hooray! Look at all that money he's raking in. All right. Now, at the end of this month, he's going to earn interest, but this time he's earning interest on this. So his next interest payment is going to be $400.80 times this 0.4%. So times 0.004 again. So I'm going to my calculator for this one for sure. $400 times $400.80 times 0.004 is, ooh, look at him. Now he's getting big bucks. Wow. He's going to get an interest payment of $1.60 this time around. Now the bank would actually keep that 0.032 hidden someplace. It wouldn't show up on his bank statement, but it would be in their computer someplace. And eventually, when that became a whole cent, they would. But we're just going to assume that it's just that. Question. Everyone else's. Yep. And you put it into an account. Yeah. There's a movie called Office Space, so that's kind of the gist of it. It's a great film. Fair warning if you're sensitive to language. Maybe don't watch it. All right, so $1.60. So what's he going to have it when he starts month 3? He's going to have this $400.80 that he already had, plus his additional $1.60. Woo! And then plus he's going to add another $200 on top of it. So whopping, what's he going to end up with here? $602.40. Does that sound right? I think that sounds right. So far he's put in $600 of his own money, and the bank's giving him an extra $2.40. He's only 2 months in. Look at all this money he's going to make, right? And in reality, he would, if he were to keep it in there for a long period of time, say an entire career. All right, so we're not going to do months 4 and 5 for the sake of time, but you get the idea how this gets pretty complicated. Each month, you got to figure out what the new interest was based on what you had at the end of the last month, and then you got to add your new money on top of it. This is going to be much simpler for us because we're not going to be doing this plus 200 each month. So when we look at this in the context of exponential functions, we won't be adding the additional $200 on. We'll be able to do this a lot simpler. We'll be able to write a simple equation that will model this. It's that adding the extra money that makes it complicated. So with no further ado, it's time to introduce the finance app. This is one of the most useful things on this calculator outside of a math class. You're going to go to the apps button on your calculator. I don't know if yours is going to have one. Finance apps button. And it's called a TVM solver. If you see something, or TMV, you're looking for finance, should be the first thing on your list there. Hit enter. If you don't have your calculator today, then solve that problem. Switch next to somebody who does. And we're looking for TVM solver. Go ahead and hit enter. Ooh, I've got some. What was I doing there? A lot of money. It's been playing around with something at some point. All right. So the hardest thing about this is knowing what all this stuff means. So I'm going to go through it really quickly. And as we're going through these problems, you're going to want to reference this little table. In the past, I've put problems like this on a test, but I always include this table in the test. I don't expect you to memorize this. This is something that you would probably, every time, if you were going to do this, say you downloaded an app that could do this, you would want to look up instructions for it, figure out exactly what this stuff is. The thing that gets tricky is that some of these things can be positive or negative, and it's not always intuitive to figure out what's the positive and what's the negative. So this allows you to deal with any kind of situation where you're going to be making a bunch of payments over time. Those payments could be going into an investment account like Jim was doing in that first example, or you could be paying down a loan, which is probably what you guys are going to be doing. Most of you will be doing at some point pretty quickly after you get out of college, either paying off a college loan or you'll start paying off a car loan or buy your first house and start paying down your mortgage. So N is the number of payments that you're going to make over time. So I just bought a house a couple of years ago and I signed a 30-year mortgage. So my number of payments would be 360. 30 years times 12 months a year, right? I is your interest rate. You're going to just put it in as a percentage, and that's your APR. PV is your present value. Again, depending on whether it's money that you have saved, so money that you own that is yours, or money that you owe to somebody else, that determines whether it's positive or negative. Payment is how much you're going to be putting in or taking out each month. Okay, so Jim was putting in $200 since he was depositing it. That would be positive. FV is future value, and this is what's going to happen at the end. A lot of times your future value is going to be zero if you're talking about a loan. Okay, because at the end of a loan, you don't want to owe any money. You want your balance to be zero, right? Now, if it's a retirement account, you don't want the future value to be zero. You want it to be several $1 million, right? So you can retire comfortably and buy that boat and all that fun stuff, right? PY and CY are payments per year, compounding per year. They are typically going to be 12. There's some exceptions, and you can read the notes down here if you're curious about that. But we'll just be using 12 for each of those. So let's look at some actual examples and play around with some money. All right, so I'm looking at this example at the bottom. When I made this, and this was like 6 or 7 years ago, these were actual numbers. I was paying off my student loans for my master's degree. And at the time, I had $13,500 roughly that I still owed to my bank to pay off those loans. My interest rate was 6.6%, and I was making payments of $205 per month. And what I wanted to figure out was how many more monthly payments do I need to make before I pay it off? So which one of these things do I not know? If I'm asking the question, how many more payments, which one of these is that? That would be N. So N is the thing that I don't know. Go ahead and write a question mark in there. And let's write in everything, and then we'll go to the calculator. I'll show you how to plug in the numbers and solve it. So my interest rate is 6.6%. My present value, that's how much I owe right now. Now I need to be careful whether that should be positive or negative. So I'm going up to my cheat sheet. When I'm owing money, that needs to be negative. So my present value is negative 13,500. My payments are 205, but again, I need to check whether that's going to be positive or negative. So looking at my cheat sheet for payments, if I'm depositing money, that's going to be positive. That's what I'm doing, putting money into that to pay it down. So it's positive 205. Future value is going to be what? Once I pay off my loan, my future value will be 0. And then payments per year, compounding per year are both going to be 12. We're not going to look at any weird situations. Those will be 12 for all of ours. Do you have any questions? Questions? Okay. Let's hold the side conversations. Again, you want to know this stuff. Okay, you're going to use this. I hope that you will use this. All right, ready calculator. Let's type all these numbers in. So N, you're got to put a number in there. You can't leave it blank. Okay, so I'm going to just leave that. I don't know why I have 660 in there. It doesn't matter. I'm going to leave it for now. 6.6 for the interest rate, negative 13,500 for my payment, or for present value. Payment is positive 205. Future value is 0. Also, payment, you may have an option at the bottom for beginner, and usually we want end. So get all that information in there and then move your cursor back up to N. That's the thing we're going to solve for. And the way that we tell the calculator to solve for one of these things is alpha enter or alpha solve. So your alpha key and then enter. So hover your cursor over N, go alpha enter, and boom. Looks like I have how many more payments to make? 82 more payments. 82 more times that I gotta write a check for $205 to that loan company. Question. Error domain. Do you have everything filled out? And you did alpha solve over n? Yeah. And you were careful with your positives and your negatives. Oh, okay. Anybody else get an error domain? There we go. Cool. Anybody else having any trouble? Okay. 82 more payments, and that was kind of bumming me out when I was looking at this. So I started asking myself some questions. So flip over on the back. So I started asking myself some questions. What if I upped my monthly loan payment to $250 instead of $205? That should pay me off quicker, right? Because I'm paying more every month. So everything would remain the same as we had on the front. We don't know N still, but our loan amount was still, what was it, 6.6. Present value is still 13,500, and we owe it, so it's negative. We're still making a payment of 205 since we're paying and it's positive. Future value is 0, 12, and 12. So the only thing that we would need to do here is go back and change our payment amounts to $250 instead of 205. And then go back and alpha solve over n again. And that made me feel a little bit better. Check that out. It looks like I've got 64 full payments. I'm going to end up paying about 65 more payments. 64 is not going to quite pay it off, so we got to round up to 65. But that last payment won't be a full payment. All right. So 65 payments, how long is that? 65 months? What are we talking about there? How many years? 65 months. 5.5-ish years. So 5.5 years. That's not too. That's better, right? 80 years was what we had before. 80 months was before. What if I decided I wanted to do it in 4 years? Now this time I know my end value. If I want to do it in 4 years, how many payments am I going to have to make? 48 payments. Interest rate didn't change. Still 6.6. Present value, I still owe the same amount. My payment is going to change. This time, that's the thing that I don't know. Future value is still going to be 0 because we're going to pay it off. So let's see what happens if I force it to be 48 months and then alpha solve over payments this time. And this will tell us how much I'm going to have to pay to get it paid off in 4 years, which looks like it's going to be about $321. So you can imagine this is me. I'm probably 5 or 6 years out of my graduate degree at this point. I'm like, I got a steady job. I'm making decent money. I'm making a little bit more every year. I can afford to pay more now than I was able to when I first got out of school. Is it worth it for me to bump up my payment from $205 to $321? That's an extra $315 or $215 a month, right? Or no, $115 a month, right? So that's pretty significant. But is it worth it to pay it off in 4 years instead of having to wait for, what was our original amount? 82 payments. How many years is 82? 6 years? 7 years. So 4 years of making payments instead of 7 years of making payments. Is that worth it? So then this math isn't on there, but I want you to see this also. Flip back over to the front side. I want you to figure out what's my overall cost if I stay at 205. If I continue to make $205 payments for 82 more payments, what's my overall cost going to be? Now I'm quitting out of my app right now to get back to my home screen because I need to do a little math. How am I going to figure this out? Well, $205 each time for 82. I think we're going to multiply, right? Let's go and do that. 205 times 82 is 16,810. That's what it's going to cost me to pay off my loan if I stick with $205 payments. Does that seem fishy to you? What was my loan amount for? How much do I owe at this point? $13,500. Why is it going to cost another $3,310 for me to pay off? What am I paying for with that $3,310? That's the interest, right? That's the cost of paying for something that you buying something you can't afford. I wasn't able to pay my tuition out of pocket when I didn't even have a job yet. So you get a loan, they give you money, you got to pay it back. It's not free though. That interest gets added on to it. So that's what it's going to cost me to do 82 payments. Now let's flip over and look at that last situation. Here we had $321 payments, but we only had 48 of them. What's this going to cost me? So I'm going to do 48 times 321. And my final cost here is significantly less. I actually end up saving like $1,200 if I up my payments. Overall, that's $1,200 that I could spend on, oh, I don't know, all kinds of cool stuff. Nice vacation, big screen TV. I don't know, but my cost here would be $15,408. So this is something I sat down one day and I was like, I'm making more money. I can afford to do this. Is it worth it for me to do this? If I can afford the extra payments, is it worth it for me to make those extra payments, have to cut back on my spending a little bit? But at the end of the day, I'm going to end up $1,200 ahead of where I would have otherwise. All right. So part C is asking how much would I save in the long run? And the answer is $1,200. All right. So sometimes when I start talking about this, my students start getting a little bit depressed about like future loans and paying off loans and interest and all this stuff. And that's okay. Like you're gonna get to a point where you realize that like loans are just kind of part of life in this society. Okay, you're gonna pay interest for something eventually. But let's look at the flip side. This is a little bit more shiny and nice. The investment, the nice news is the same math that causes you to pay interest is going to get you money when you invest stuff, right? So let's look at the flip side. So we're going to look at a different situation where we're going to invest some money. I'm going to put $1,000 away now. So let's say this is like, I just graduated from college and my distant Aunt Martha sent me a check for $1,000 to say congratulations. I'm going to do the smart thing. I'm not going to go out and spend it. I'm going to put it in an investment account. Okay. And I'm going to invest it for 15 years. So how many months are we talking about? 15 years. 180 months. So I'm going to be putting money into it 180 times. But that means I'm also going to be earning interest 180 times, and I'm earning 5% interest, which is pretty decent. My present value is how much is in my account right now. And again, looking at my cheat sheet, my present value, if it's money that I have saved or that I own personally, it's positive. And that's the case. I've got $1,000 that is my money, so it's positive. I'm not owing it to someone that would make it negative. Now it's asking how much are we going to put away each month? I don't know what my payment is. We'll come back and solve that. But I want my future value to be $50,000. I want to turn that $1,000 into $50,000. So maybe this is something where I have a goal to have $50,000 saved up for, I don't know, down payment on a house in 15 years. So I need to look at this because this is kind of weird. Future value is if I want to receive that money at the end, it needs to be negative. Okay, this is where I would think it would be positive because I think it's my money, right? $50,000. But no, they're going to give me that money. I'm going to pull that money out of my account at the end. So it does need to be negative. So negative 50,000. And we'll leave payments and compounding at 12 as usual. So let's put this into our app. So just as a reminder, to get to the app, you want to hit the apps button. You're looking for finance, which is usually right up at the top. And then TVM solver. And let's just put that information that we wrote down into here. So we're talking 180 months at 5% APR, starting with $1,000. I don't know what my payment is yet. My future value is going to be negative 50 grand. And we're going to solve over payments. So alpha solve over payments. Now that came out positive, which makes sense because according to my cheat sheet, payments is positive when we are paying money or depositing money into it. So it looks like I'd have to put in about 180 bucks a month. So if I could be saving $180 a month with that interest rate, starting out with 1,000, I could have 50 grand at the end of all that. All right, so here's the big one. This is the one that I had to deal with recently. And these numbers are totally made off. This is where I kind of go away from my personal finances. But let's say you're in a job and you're making pretty good money, right? Let's say you decide that you could put aside, you could afford to spend $1,250 per month on a home mortgage. Okay, so this is going to happen to most of you. Most of you will probably start out living in an apartment or a rented house. Okay, and then at some point, once you've saved up enough for a down payment, you'll start thinking about buying a house. And you'll start with like, well, my rent is $1,000 a month. If I put in an extra 250 bucks a month, what kind of house could I go shopping for? Okay, so we're going to go with 4% APR. Now, I'll tell you that right now, home mortgage price rates are like way higher than this. They're like 6 or 7. Are they that high? That might not be true. Maybe not that high. They're over 5. I know that, and it looks like they're going to keep going up. But let's go 4%. That's fairly typical. They will come back down. I imagine by the time you guys start looking for houses, mortgage prices will settle down again. So, all right. So, 30-year mortgage is how many payments? 30 times 12, 360, and that's the idea of writing a check for $1,250 every month for 360 months. That's a big commitment. When you sit down at that table to sign that mortgage, like you got to sign like 50 different places, you start really thinking about like that's a lot of time and a lot of money. But then you get a really nice house, right? So okay, so 4%. My present value would be how much money I'm taking out for my mortgage. Now, I don't know that. That's what I'm trying to figure out. What I do know is that I can afford to pay $1,250 a month. So I'm looking at my cheat sheet here. If I'm paying money, that needs to be positive. So my payment is going to be $1,250 and positive $1,250. Future value, that's at the end of our 360 payments. We don't want to owe anything at the end, so that's going to be 0. And 12 and 12 for payments and compound. So let's plug this in and see what kind of house we can be shopping for on a $1,250 mortgage payments. $4%. Don't know my present value yet. 1250. We want our future value to be 0. So solving for present value. Now this is going to be money that we are going to owe, so I expect to get a negative value, or you're getting a negative value for yours. Okay. So we could start shopping in the $250,000 range. If we were a little bit flexible with that 1,250, then we could look and say, well, maybe I can afford another $50, and let's see what that would give me. But for this amount, for $1,250, we're going to be about $262,000. And if that was firm, if we were like 1,250 is all I can afford, then we would want to start shopping probably in the $200,000 to $250,000 range. Now, as somebody who's done some home shopping in Whatcom County in the last 2 years, you're not going to find very much for in that price range. There are some things, fixer, sweat equity. Now, but here's the thing: you can't just walk up and buy a house with nothing, right? You got to have. Have you ever heard of a down payment before? You got to have a down payment, right? So that would be something that you want to be saving up for right away when you get your job. You start paying your rent. Start paying a little, another $100, $200 a month into a savings account for a down payment for your first house. Let's say we could afford a down payment of, say, $50,000. How does that change our math? So if you could make a down payment of $50,000, then you don't have to be shopping around 262 anymore. You're going to be shopping around what? You're going to be shopping around $310,000. Your down payment, you never have to pay interest on the down payment. You just plunk it down up front. So this doesn't affect anything. If you say you ended up buying a $312,000 home, you would pay 50 grand for it up front, and then you take out a loan for $262,000 and then pay that off over the 30 years. Okay, so if you've got that down payment saved up, now you're looking at a $312,000. Yes. So it's different. What I've learned recently is 20%. You want to shoot for 20. If you don't have 20% of the purchase price for a down payment, then you have to pay some extra money. You have to pay into this thing called, what's it called? It's insurance, basically. It's interest insurance, principal interest insurance, something like that. I can't remember the exact word for it, but basically you got to pay some extra money because you didn't have quite enough. Okay. The banks are taking a bigger risk on you if you don't have as much skin in the game to start off with. And so until you get up to that 20% mark, until you own 20% of your actual house, you're going to have to pay that interest or that. And it's not much. It's like when I priced it out for it was like $40 to $60 a month. So it wasn't too bad. You know, when you're making a payment this big, that's not a deal breaker. But if you can get 20%, like that sets you up really well. It makes it a lot easier. Most people on their first houses these days can't do 20%, which means you end up paying that little bit extra each month until you can get up to that 20% mark. And it depends. There's different programs depending. So if you're a veteran, if you've served, there's different programs that you can get into where sometimes they'll waive that. They'll help you get in at a lower starting value. So I've seen some down payments that were even like less than 5%. People are still getting loans for them and stuff. All right. So here's the real kicker for me. Let's say we went out and bought a $312,000 house. Okay. With our 50 grand, and our original price was what we took the loan out for was 262. Okay. So we paid in 50 grand. So go ahead and put your app here for me. Second quit to get out of there. We paid our 50 grand, type that in. Plus, we're going to pay $1,250 a month. How many times? 360 times, right? For 30 years. When I hit enter here, this is going to tell me how much it actually costs to buy this house overall for the full 30 years. Be prepared to be a little shocked here. Wow, that came out amazingly. Like, wasn't expecting that. Is anybody shocked by that? Is anybody in here taking personal finance? So you've probably seen all this before. So this, yeah, I remember the first time I saw this. So you got a $312,000 house, but you paid $500,000 for it, which means you paid $312,000 for the house. And how much did you pay in interest? Like almost $200,000 in interest. Okay. Now, if you start buying a home at a higher interest rate, that goes up. A lot of times, I think right now we're getting close to 50-50. You end up paying almost as much for the house as you do for the interest on a 30-year mortgage. All right. And that scares people at first. Anybody feeling kind of depressed about this whole thing right now? I want you to keep in mind a house that is worth $312,000 today, okay, is going to be worth a lot more in 30 years. Whatcom County has been growing at over 10% valuation per year. Now, some people think that's a bit of a bubble, and it's probably closer to 7 or 8. But even at 7% for 30 years, let me do some math that we'll learn about later on. So $312,000 times, let's say if your house goes up by 7% each year for 30 years, your house is going to be worth almost $2.5 million at the end of 30 years. Okay, so the fact that you paid $500,000 for it, including all your interest, that's not that big of a deal, right? In the end, you still won almost $200,000. Okay, so big takeaways for me when I started messing around with this stuff is you want to get in early on this whole real estate thing. You get to the point where you can afford a down payment, start thinking about buying a house and do that. Because what's your other option? If you don't own a house, where are you going to live? Live in an apartment, right? What would happen if you had an apartment that cost $1,250 a month for 30 years? Well, you would end up spending all this money, right? And what do you have for it at the end of that? You got nothing, right? Where if you had bought the house and spent the exact same amount, you've got a $250 million home. If Whatcom County keeps up, it's like I saw 11% recently on my most recent home report. You're looking at like a $7 million home. No, that's not right. Yeah, that is. Yeah, that's over 30 years. So if it keeps going up at 11%, yeah. All right. What do you guys think? Fairly useful? So this is the kind of stuff when you do go around, say you're shopping for a car. All right, let's do one more. Forget about the problems down at the bottom of the page. Let's do something that's going to be probably something more like what you're going to be dealing with in the near future. Car loans. Let's go with 4% for a car loan. I think there are a lot of times less than that. No, let's go 3. Say we wait for a good deal. And car loans aren't usually nearly as long. Usually like a 3 or 4 year car loan. What do you guys want to go with? How many years are you going to pay off? You just got out of college, you got a sweet job, and you're like, you know what? It's time for me to have a nice, respectable car. How many years do you want to spend paying it off? 3 years, 4 years? 4 years. Okay, that's 48 months, right? 3%. All right, here's the big question is how much can you afford for your payment? How much a month do you want to spend on this awesome new car that you just got? What do you think? Someone give me a number. How much is your job? Have you looked up like how much the careers you're interested or making a year? Anybody got any numbers on that? No? Out of college these days, pretty good salary would be, I don't know. I don't even know. I would priced out like entry level jobs. 60, 70 would be pretty decent, I think. Some of you are going to be, depending on where you're at, you might be making over 100 starting out. Let's say $70,000 a year. But the government's going to take out about, let's say 30% to be safe. So times 0.7. So you're only going to actually get about $50,000 a year after your taxes and everything else gets taken out. And then divide that by 12. So your paycheck's going to be around $4,000 per month. So how much of that do you want to spend on your car? All of it? No, you gotta live, you gotta buy food, holiday gifts, gas, insurance, all those things. How much do we want to spend? Not half of it. No, for sure not. Unless you want a really nice car. What do you think? $300, $400, $500? $600. All right, here we go. Back into the app. TVM solver. So my payment cheat sheet, we're depositing money into the account, making a payment. So $600 a month. And then I'll go to my present value. I'm taking out a loan, so I expect this to be negative. So you could afford a $27,000 vehicle if you didn't have any down payment, which would get you what these days? Get you a really nice used car, or kind of a, I don't know, I'm priced out cars these days. Any car people in here? It's just 27 grand get you. Can you buy like a Toyota Tacoma for 27 grand, brand new? I don't think so. Maybe, yeah. But then you could start doing some more math, like, oh, but maybe I want to pay $700 a month. What would that get me? What kind of car could I get? Oh, 31,000. Then you could take your calculator to the dealership. When the dealer starts spitting numbers at you, because they will, right? You walk into a dealership, they will find a way to make your payment work. And you got to be careful of that, because they're using the same function. Theirs will be on a computer screen, but they'll say, oh, you only want to pay $400 a month. We can sell you a $40,000 car for $400 a month. You're just going to be paying for it for 115 months, almost 10 years. And you don't want to be paying 10 years for a car. Once your car is 10 years old, it's not worth a whole lot. You don't want to be spending money on it for that long. All right. Cool. All right. That's all I got for you guys today. Yeah, I don't want you to be depressed about any of this stuff. I've had my students say that in the past. They're like, interest sounds scary. It is kind of, but it's one of those things, if you know the rules of the game and you make some smart decisions early, okay? I'm going to tell you, this might be the second time you've heard it. Start investing right away. Don't make the mistake that I did and wait. All right, thank you, folks. Have a great Thanksgiving.